or whatever.
Yeah, we should have been doing it all along and we never think to, but now we will.
Good. That's great. It'll be helpful to our rapporteur too. Thank you, Liz. Thank you. Jessica, just want to greet you. We're so glad you're here. Hello. Hi. Oh, you're muted. Don't worry. But we're very glad you're on site. And
Yes.
as you probably heard, if you want to, if you feel like it, put something in the chat about how you feed the good wolf in yourself. All right.
Yeah, sure. Thank you so
Great.
much.
Thank
I'm
you.
excited about this one.
Hello, Judy. You're muted.
Oh, good. And Ron and Liz, you'll save the chat and I'll do all that stuff for me.
Yep, absolutely.
Appreciate it.
Thank you, Liz.
And I'm then going to get coffee.
Excellent idea.
Coffee and water.
Sure.
Thanks.
Well, Carla, hello.
Hi.
Whoa, that's some monumental structure that that you're speaking from.
I know. I thought it was perfect for the topic.
Uh-huh.
It's supposed to be internal computer wasteland or something.
Uh-huh. Very nice. But actually, we'd rather see your face. Tell you the truth. Uh-huh, please, if you don't mind. But
I'm getting there.
oh, great, great. Nice to play with that. You bet. At this point, I always like to quote my favorite couplet, uh, shake and shake the ketchup bottle. None'll come and then a lot'll. So this is the point. This is the point at which we shake and shake the ketchup bottle. Uh, Liz, how should I handle the quest the getting acquiescence to the recording? Is there a language you familiar
I'll
with?
take care of it. Oh,
Where
you mean for the
well,
people on it?
where I can get,
Zoom is, when they log in, they'll agree. When
yeah.
they log into it, it'll say this meeting is being recorded. So I think we're
Oh,
okay.
oh, it'll say that to them when they log in.
Each
Oh,
person, when they log in, it'll tell them that the
Great.
meeting is being recorded,
Great.
and they have to agree.
right. That's swell. What was the last thing you said?
They have to agree
Oh, okay.
that they agree that the meeting is being recorded.
Great, great.
The prompt is in the chat.
Okay. Oh, Jessica, that's very, very thoughtful. Thank you. What is that phrase in noose? I'm not familiar.
Oh,
Is that Latin or what? What is it?
in Newcastle. Okay, so I tend to be kind of verbose, and my undergraduate advisor always would stop me and say, "Give me the in Nuke version," which basically means in a nutshell. And I had no idea what it meant at the time, but he said, "Everybody knows what in Nuke means. It means like make it brief."
Liz, have you ever come across that in Nuke? And do you think it's Latin, Jessica? By any what do you think?
Yeah, it is Latin.
Oh, it is Latin. Oh boy, well that's nice. That's actually something. Liz, I'm surprised you haven't come across it since you could certainly use it in your line of work in Nuke and with a hard K. Oh, oh boy, that's oh well, I've already learned more than I have in the last 3 seminars that I took. Uh, ah, oh, and there's your limbic system coming up. Uh-huh.
Told you I can't do a Nuke.
Oh, very. Oh, I'm so
Whoa.
going to save this. Yes. Judy, did you hear this Nuke in Nuke thing? Have you ever heard that in Nuke? Oh, great. All right.
There's a Wikipedia for a minute.
Oh, who got up the Latin for us?
Oh, is this me again?
Oh, but now I'm learning even more since ablative singular is something I've seen two or twice in my lifetime, but never actually learned what it meant. Uh, oh, Pliny the Elder. How could I have missed that? Who ascribes to? How do you know all of this, Jessica? You were a classical scholar? Uh,
I minored in classical studies, but I literally copied that from Wikipedia. The ablative singular and the elder story. I didn't know that part
uh-huh.
either.
Uh-huh. Well, what the hell was Cicero thinking? How would on earth would he have figured that you could do that, except through micro technology? Now you could, but what what did he mean by that? That you could boil it down to something so succinct that it could fit in a nutshell? Also, that sounds like like Hamlet might have been thinking of it when he talked about a nutshell. Uh, oh, just very.
The Erie edition is just frightening.
The ignorance is rivaled only by
Oh,
the.
no, quite the contrary.
I used to have a nickname as the erudite blatherskate.
Love it.
And Ron, I suppose that if anybody wants to provide their name, email, other contact information in the chat, if they want us to, get on the Good Wolf email list,
Right.
they are welcome to do that.
John, we always send out a notification either that afternoon or at the latest tomorrow morning, and I'll put that in there so
Okay, great.
everybody who not only turns up, registered but didn't make it, will get that. So everyone will get that, and I'll indicate that. That's great. Emily, hello.
Hi, Ron, how
Beautiful.
are you?
You look wonderful and beautiful painting.
Oh,
Beautiful painting. Oh, terrific. Thank you. Lovely. Very nice. Glad you're here.
thank you. Me too. I've missed these, Ron. I don't like that we do these things less.
I agree. We feel that way too. We have a little challenge for you if you like, if you feel like it. Put in the chat one thing that a favorite way of yours to feed your good wolf. That is your instinct to be kind, compassionate, and creative. You'll see some when you go there. Ignore the Latin exegesis. And
Okay. Thanks.
oh, Judy, thank you very much for that, for your contribution. That's so practicable. And Emily, thank you too. Helen, like your PS, your little additional sunshine. Very nice.
For some of us, it's food and coffee.
For some of us, it's just coffee. Who can face food before the coffee? Uh, Helen, for that admission about you and the sun. Uh,
You know, I don't know if I've shared, Ron, but some of my earliest interest when I was like a teenager in the brain was my awareness that something profound happened when I was hungry. That
mhm.
that my experience was that the rest of the world became evil. Um, and
Anger
it was
is
really,
real.
really
Hungry anger, man. It's real.
right. It's really, really horrible when the rest of the world becomes, and so trying to figure out what's the connection between the rest of the world and my being hungry, right?
But John, that's a telling reference in light of the wolf metaphor
Right.
that you experienced.
Oh, I mean, I became aware there was
Right.
really both were within me. Yeah.
Very interesting.
Yes,
I
and
would,
many people in my life since then have not let me do anything important socially without having food.
Hmm.
John,
My
now you have to break out into "Hungry Like the Wolf" by Duran Duran.
Marika, greetings. Nice to see you. And George, so glad you're here from France. That's lovely. Thank you so much. We now have UK and France represented. And hello, Lorna. Hello, Lorna. You're muted. Just want you to know how glad we are to see you.
Nice to see you. Thank you.
Delighted that we're here.
Hi.
Please know that we are going to record this session, so you'll be able to access that if you like when you do your report on the session.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Sure. We thought that would be helpful.
Thank
Okay.
So Ron, we are at 1:30. It's okay to
Right.
hold if you want, but I just want to.
Well, I do not want to detract any time from the time we have with John. John, as you know, we have about I think 60 people enrolled, registered, and so you don't never expect 100%, but obviously there are some stragglers. But frankly, I'd rather start so that all they'll miss is me jabbering, and they'll be coming on as I'm doing the introductory. So why don't we do that? So that they wouldn't have missed any of you. So, okay, friends, colleagues, good afternoon. As I think all of you know, I'm Ron Gross from the Seminar on Innovation, and I'm privileged to welcome you on behalf of myself and our co-chair, Dr. Elizabeth Cohn. It's a pleasure to also warmly welcome members of 3 university seminars which are co-sponsoring this convening, which is a rare distinction in our 20-year history. This unprecedented interest across the campus is a tribute to the importance of our topic and to our speakers' extraordinary thought leadership. We also welcome Lorna Kimoye and as our rapporteur, and gladly to greet our participants from abroad, the UK, France so far. We'll probably be having some as far flung as Pakistan. Of course, we're the ones who are far flung from them. Before I introduce our speaker, let me just cover a couple of practical matters which most of you are acquainted with. First of all, if you could kindly put your full name on your picture, that's great. I see. In the upper right-hand corner, you have a little box that gives you the option of between gallery view and speaker view. Gallery view presents a little thumbnails picture of everybody that's on the call on the screen. The speaker view gives you just the speaker, large size, so that, and I would certainly suggest that while John is talking that you go for that one. Then if you have comments or indeed questions that you want to ask at the conclusion of the presentation, put them in the chat too, and that way you'll be queued up to speak and ask a question, and you'll know that you're seen and when you're coming up. And of course, keep yourselves muted. I'll do that to myself in a moment. Most of you are while John is talking. As I say, after John's presentation. We'll have as much Q&A and comment as we can, and we will conclude the session as promised, but probably reluctantly, no later than 2:30. So it is my great pleasure to introduce John Delfs. He's a physician, a scientist, an educator. Thank you. Yes, indeed. Hi, Ricardo. Yes, that's quite appropriate, and it will be even more so for those of you that are not familiar with what he has to offer us. He's a physician, a scientist, an educator, a healthcare leader whose career has spanned behavioral neurology and neuroscience, internal and geriatric medicine, hospice and palliative care, and medical ethics. He's a graduate of Tulane and Harvard Medical School. He received his postgraduate training in internal medicine at UCLA and Harvard. At the Harvard Medical School, he served as assistant professor of medicine and neurology, and at the Harvard School of Public Health as assistant professor of health policy and management. He has been honored by the American Medical Association with the annual William Beaumont Award in Medicine. John founded Good Wolf based on his belief that people everywhere should be able to benefit from understanding themselves better through neuroscience. So please join me in welcoming John Delfs to our seminar.
Thank you very much, Ron, Liz, and the other co-chairs for inviting me. It's very exciting to be able to share with you my thoughts, and I will share my screen, and hopefully. Did that work?
Yes, for me.
Good. So what we're going to what we'll do today is look at why Good Wolf, the organization that I founded about 5 years ago. We'll look at a case study where we'll look at what we translate and teach, and that is what we know, how we guide people in what we call the Good Wolf 3 steps to attain what we call sapience or wisdom in our lives, and the outcome of this particular case study. And hopefully we'll have time to look at a couple of other examples of feeding the Good Wolf, including at major international level, and a brief look at the future. So why Good Wolf? And let me just say at the beginning, I tried to pare this down, but in order to understand the context for Good Wolf, we really need to do essentially a survey course in cognitive neuroscience. So I have attempted to do that in what will probably be a very dizzying fashion, with the invitation that if you want to learn more, obviously I hope we'll have time for some questions and answers and discussion. But if you want to learn more, that you both go to our website, and that you make sure that you're on our mailing list, or that you engage with me individually and personally, which I would welcome, as we're just trying to do our best. So why Good Wolf? Well, our brain is our control system. Everything we do and experience throughout our life arises from our brain. Our feelings, our beliefs, our decisions, and our actions all come from our brain. And that means that everything in human history, both truly wonderful and amazing, and truly awful and dreadful, have been supported by the functioning of our brains. Good Wolf's moral context is that humans are intrinsically valuable and worth saving, and that all persons should therefore be supported in becoming fully actualized with the right of self-determination and the right to pursue meaningful lives. I believe we're at a critical moment. And as Einstein said in 1946, in talking about the advent of nuclear weapons and its implications for our civilization, he basically said a new type of thinking is essential if we're to survive and move to higher levels. And I think that is absolutely true. a story about two wolves. And the story is attributed to indigenous peoples of North America. And it's about an elder, sometimes it's a grandfather, grandmother teaching, but the elder is teaching some youth. And the elder is basically saying, within each one of us, throughout our entire lives, two wolves inside us are at war. There's a wolf that's kind and caring and building of community and altruistic and loving. And there's another wolf that's insecure and greedy and angry and destructive. And those two wolves, every day of our lives, are in a battle. They're in a war throughout our lives. And of course, the youth says, which one wins? The elder replies, the one you feed. As a neurobiologist and neuroscientist, neurologist, I felt that that is a wonderful metaphor for what we know about ourselves from neuroscience, as well as from many of the great traditions. We know from major advances in neuroscience what it takes, what feeds our good wolves. And we're going to talk about that. And Good Wolf, therefore, is dedicated to bringing this knowledge and its practical applications to the larger community. What we do, we translate largely from cognitive and behavioral neuroscience what we know about ourselves. We teach practical insights from the cognitive neuroscience, and we guide the application of what we know, and we call this the Good Wolf 3 steps, which is what I will later in the session hope to get to and end with, to talk about how we teach and what we think is required for us to attain this wisdom that we aspire to, this sapience. My major colleague and co-creator of Good Wolf was unable to be with us physically today, but her name is Jade DeSaussure, whom I met at Fordham in a program a number of years ago we created together for people coming out of lengthy periods of incarceration. I realize that I will probably have to do an unshare and then a sharing of that video. So and I hope you.
I love that the Good Wolf pairs education, the knowledge, as well as how to behave, right? Because I oftentimes see, especially when it comes to education, there's either a tendency to focus on describing the problem without providing a solution, or describing the problem and the solution, but not delivering the solution in a way that allows for people to really take ownership of it and use it within their own lives and incorporate it. My background is social work, and we talk about the biopsychosocial, spiritual kind of model. And I just find that we don't spend enough time talking about the biological, and there's a lot out there that actually doesn't get to the masses. And so being able to kind of pull it together, package it, and make it for public consumption, I think is just a wonderful thing.
Thank you, Jade. So our case study, Lifting Up Westchester is a prominent not-for-profit provider of services for unhoused persons in Westchester, based in White Plains, serving much of Westchester, and does an extraordinary job of ministering to people at the lowest points in their lives. I had a serendipitous conversation with the leader of Lifting Up Westchester, who shared with me that they had major challenges while they were made up of an extraordinarily committed and dedicated staff, that the staff really needed to grow, and that they were having a lot of challenge with that. And the challenges that were described is the staff was not engaging in professional or personal learning and growth. They had huge variability in knowledge, competence, and confidence, that they were often the staff caring for unhoused persons in emergency shelters and rehabilitation facilities and supported housing programs were themselves often carrying high levels of personal trauma from their lives, which of course made them realize how important this was and make them want to commit themselves to giving back. But those same high levels of personal trauma got in the way, and the work itself often triggered their trauma. The environment wasn't experienced as safe, and the staff stress was a major barrier to growth and improved performance. So our intervention, the idea behind our educational interventions is that this stuff is fascinating, right? So what we know about ourselves is amazing and not intuitively obvious, no matter how brilliant you are, if you have not actually studied cognitive neuroscience. So there's this opportunity to engage people with something that's really fascinating and to have them begin to look at themselves and create a pathway for their own growth. Our intervention is basically teaching staff and leadership about insights from brain science to engage them in new learning and participation in their own change, to have them understand that the change is not only necessary, but it's possible, given what we know about brain plasticity and the importance of the environment in forming our brains in a very active and ongoing basis. And really to form with this education what we might call a cognitive construct or a pathway that leads to the outcomes we desire. And we couple that with guided trauma-informed practices of social and emotional skills and collaborative problem solving and working together. So our methodologies, very quickly, one of them is based on the trans-theoretical model of change, and that's like there's a mind state where people are pre-contemplative. They're not even thinking about change, right? It's not on their radar screen, and you have to move people from not even having something on their radar screen to at least thinking about it. And that's the Prochaska and D. Clementi often called stages of change model. Jack Meserow at Columbia, starting in the 70s and 80s, taught about transformative and did research on what was called transformative learning theory. And Meserow's concept was that to have learning that changes us in a significant way and changes our life pathway require a number of specific requirements, but one of them is that a person is confronted with something that he called a disorienting dilemma. We would call it maybe cognitive dissonance or an epiphany, but realizing that something is true, but the something that is true is in conflict with what a person has always believed about themselves or about the world, and that opens a huge opportunity for learning. We use a mindfulness-based social emotional learning approach, and there's a large literature on the power of teaching about the brains to change mindset. So these are some of the bases of our methodologies. So we teach what we know. And so we're going to now go through a lot of what we know. And just fasten your seatbelts. So our brain's marvelous. We have about 86 billion neurons. And those 86 billion neurons form somewhere between 100 trillion and 300 trillion connections. So we have a lot of pathways and a lot of connections in our brain. Our brains, unlike what we thought 20 years ago, continually adapt and change. Our brains are an active organ. And what we do, the experiences we have and the choices we make determine who we will become and who we will be. And we have these amazing, unique, and wonderful human capabilities. So I'm going to go through quickly sort of 9 major brain insights put together from literally tens of thousands of references, and I think representing arguably our cutting edge understanding of ourselves as cognitive and behaving beings. The first is that the most basic function of our brain, it's to survive and to get our genes into the next generation. And so we have this pyramid, this good wolf pyramid, that starts here in its foundational element with physical survival and procreation. And all this is stuff we teach. So we talk about we have to acquire water, food, and shelter, obviously. So our brain has to control our digestion and our metabolism. It has to control our blood flow, our circulation, our respiration, keeping us alive. We have to respond to and survive threats. We'll talk about that a little more. We have to heal and recover from injuries. We have to maintain our physical, economic, and social health. And, you know, part of this is, is hoarding, is stockpiling resources, right? Because we might need them tomorrow or in the winter. Obviously, it's courting and mating. It's feeding, protecting, and teaching our young. And it's assuring that our offspring attain their own procreational potential. So there's this, at the very basis of our brain is our brain's responsibility for our physical survival and for getting our genes into the next generation. Now, the next part of that pyramid we call, not by a word that feels very good, but we call it domination. And we talk about, we'll be talking about the A team a little bit later. We talk about our behaviors to dominate as B team behaviors. So what do we do in this? Well, we've used all these incredibly unique and wonderful human capabilities to dominate other species and other tribes. We use our language and communication. Social cooperation is really felt, as you know, to be the reason that humans dominated over other species. We have this astounding ability to transmit culture because most of our brain development occurs, vast majority of our brain development occurs after birth. So our brains develop in the context of culture. Our brains develop in the context of learning. And that learning not only influences how our brains develop, but is critically important. So that if you have a terribly abused infants who are kept in cages in the basement and just fed, their brains end up being a third of the size. They don't have social abilities. They can't walk. They don't have language, etc. So that's extraordinarily important. Our social group categorizations, our ability to recognize whether somebody is in our tribe or another tribe is very primary in our dominating other groups. And we have basically, up to the current time, used our technological advances predominantly for economic and military advantage. And that's a big problem because our technological advances are, in many cases, exceeding our ability as a culture to manage them, and they threaten the sustainability of our planet and the well-being of human society. So that's for the two basic sort of brain functions. We're going to talk about the thing that hopefully goes on top of the pyramid, which we call sapience. So our unique human capabilities. Well, we have language and communication. We can put things together into narratives. We can use those narratives to predict a story into the future, to plan. Strategically, we can cooperate in groups and coordinate our activities. We have this generational transmission of culture. We can look at ourselves. We can become self-aware about how we're feeling, how we're thinking. We can think about ourselves thinking. And our thinking about ourselves and what we think about can become an important part of our experience. So what we're thinking about can be an important part of what develops our brains in the ways they want them to be. And we have the capability of what we call self-governance. We have the capability of moral agency. Now, the good wolf is part of this wonderful capability, and as Ron said earlier, it's our capacity and propensity toward love, kindness, caring, empathy, community, fairness, and altruism. much of our brain's work is not accessible to our consciousness. Probably the vast majority of what our brain does is simply not accessible to our conscious awareness. And this includes the assumptions that underlie and drive our emotions and our decisions and our behaviors. As many of you probably know, probably the majority of decisions that humans make are made in their non-conscious brain before we become consciously aware. Even when that happens, they come into our consciousness, and my experience of it is that I made it rationally based on these values and based on these predictions, et cetera. It turns out that that's not the case unless we develop strategies for bringing the decision-making process into our consciousness. Normally, those decisions are not made using our conscious brain. Now, we talked about the good wolf. What's the bad wolf? Well, we believe that the bad wolf is really our instinctual survival behaviors and our learned behaviors of dominance from the past that have been transmitted down in our culture, arising largely from our non-conscious brains that drive experiences, emotions, and behaviors that now, in the modern world, often no longer serve our best interests. And if we're in a situation where we all of a sudden experience great fear or great anger and we happen to have a gun, we can ruin somebody else's life and also our life.
John, just
Yes.
for a second, there's a number of people who are seeing a little box on your screen. I'm wondering if you can unshare and reshare to get rid of a gray box that is bothering some of the viewers. Thank you.
It was there from the beginning.
Is that okay now?
Nope, it's still there.
It's still, so I think there's like two gray boxes, one at the bottom and one on the upper right. Oh, that you got rid of the one on the upper right. Can you do the same for the one on the bottom?
The one on the bottom is very big.
We were asking because people are want to make sure they get everything on your slide, and they're worried they might be missing something. So we appreciate your helping us, because people are very concerned that they can't see and might want to have the whole thing.
Are the boxes gone?
Nope. The one on the bottom goes from the O in no, the entire name of longer, and into the word serve, I think, S-E.
Yeah.
While we're working on this, I just want to welcome Mariam Khan from Pakistan, who's joined us, and Jacqueline Pogue.
Hi.
Hi, you two. Glad you're here. Also, Ricardo.
Oh, got rid of the one on the bottom. Yay!
Yay, thank you.
Always Ricardo. Always Ricardo. Thank you so much, John. And
Okay.
it'll also make the recording better for you if you want to use excerpts
Yeah.
of it. So now it was above what we know. So now we can see what we know.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Super. So another very, very important concept is that we build a personal map of the world. So what we experience having constructed it in our minds. We think we're experiencing what's actually going on out there. What we're experiencing is something typically 150 to 200 milliseconds after it happens, after there's been huge processing, and we experience it within our brain, what we call our personal mind map. So the personal mind map, therefore, since it's what we experience, we make our decisions based on our personal mind map, which is our beliefs about what is true. That important implication is that optimal decisions and actions depend on whether our personal mind map, i.e. our beliefs about ourselves and the world, correspond with reality. Changes in reality are new learning, require physical changes in neurons and synapses in our brain, And the process of doing that, the process of remodeling our personal mind map, like learning or having major changes, is what we experience as grieving. Personal mind map has other implications. There are areas in the front of our brain, in the prefrontal cortex and the anterior cingulate cortex, where our brains unconsciously make a decision about whether somebody is us or not, right? And if somebody is seen as like us and part of our group, we feel empathy for them, and our brain processes them as humans. Unfortunately, if we have not experienced a type of person, a way a person looks or dresses or speaks, when we're in our first 3 or 4 years of life, for the rest of our lives, these parts of our brains don't process those people as human. So this is an amazing study which was done with expatriate Caucasians in China. It's consistent with now dozens of other studies showing the same thing. But when a Caucasian person was shown a picture of a Chinese person being injured, well, when they were seen, when a Caucasian person sees a Caucasian face or a Chinese person sees a Chinese face, then these brain areas light up. When the Caucasian person sees a Chinese face suffering, or the Chinese person sees a Caucasian face suffering, these areas are essentially silent. And that's pretty hardwired from early experiences. Now, thankfully, what happens is that if over our lives we make friends with people who our brains originally recognized as other and not as humans, not like us, and we get to know them personally, and we think about our values, and we think about what's right and wrong, and that's a part of our lives, we develop in other parts of our brain goal-directed behavior, so that what happens in our non-conscious brain when we engage with an other is that we have a value discussion, again, that we are not consciously aware of, so that our goal-directed behaviors may overcome may say, no, that's not right. They are too human, right? And so what comes into our consciousness and into our feelings can be something very different from what we would have experienced had we not sort of trained our non-conscious brain to have that goal-directed conversation. Experiencing is predicting. The neurobiologist, psychologist Richard Gregory at the University of Bristol in the 1950s was fascinated with how we process things we see. And basically what Professor Gregory did, this is actually a video that he made in the 1950s, which I want to share with you.
This is the hollow head.
I will try to share this just a moment. Can everybody see?
Actually, at the moment, it's a perfectly normal head of Charlie Chaplin, but wait, as it comes round, you'll see, or will you, that it's hollow, the back of it coming round.
So at this point, can everybody see that?
Yeah.
It's hollow on the back.
Now, it's actually a hollow mask. It appears to rotate.
So that's hollow, right?
In the opposite direction,
So,
and amazingly, the nose sticks out, although it's actually sticking
now we
in.
can see it's hollow.
Coming round now is the normal, correct as it were, face, and likely that a nose.
Okay, so everybody right there can see that it's hollow, right? So I want everybody on this call to use your cognitive attentional, rational capabilities and see this accurately, okay? Try hard.
Sticks in that a face is hollow, so you see it as convex.
I dare say that most people were not able to see that as hollow. And let's hope I can get the screen back without the boxes, right? There we go.
We have the top box, but we were not as bothered by that one.
Oh, what a drag. So I will try again.
Well, the top box didn't cover anything.
It's okay. I think it's okay, and I think it seemed like it disappeared. Let's give it a minute. Okay, it's gone.
Good. So what happens, of course, is that light enters our eye. It is processed in the retina initially, which is part of the brain. It goes back to the thalamus. It goes to the striate cortex in the occipital lobe. And there our brain processes whether it's a dot or a bar, and if it's a bar, which way it's rotating. And then processing, actually, we use most of our brains most of the time, right? The old fallacy about using a teeny part of your brain is just not true. And so visual signals are processed widely in our cortical association areas where it triggers memories of past similar experiences. And then our frontal lobe and our amygdala and our hippocampus and other areas work together to predict and assign meaning and importance and decide on what we actually experience and what we should do. So all that takes at least 100 to 200 milliseconds. And what we experience is not necessarily the external reality, because our brain is simply not designed to tell us the truth. Our brain tries to make sense of things based on memories of the past. That has huge implications for how we ought to live our lives, because if we can slow down is the first of Goodwolf's 3 steps that I'll be talking about. But if we can slow down and let our brain do what's called predictive error correction, we will not in this case, because we've seen so many tens of thousands of faces and none of them have been convex. So typically we actually can't overcome this one. It's just too hardwired. But usually, if we can slow down and look around and take our time and query our assumptions, etc., we can get closer and closer and closer to what's actually happening in the real world. The 7th of 9 things I want to talk about are our threat response, which is about chronic and toxic stress. Walter Cannon at Harvard Medical School, now 100 years ago, described the fight or flight response, the acute stress response to the perception of a threat to our survival. And what happens is that our brain, much more rapidly than we are consciously aware of. So it happens before the 100 or 200 milliseconds. Our brain processes an input and predicts whether it's a threat to our survival or not. And our hypothalamus sends messages to our body, both neuronal messages and releasing factor messages, to prepare for fighting or fleeing. Our body experiences this physiological preparation, and so ideally we are able to either fight off the physical threat or escape. That's what it's all about. It's about survival. It's down in that basic part of the pyramid. But in our modern world, there's a huge, huge problem with this. And that is that with continuing uncertainty or continuing fear, our threat detection systems stay active and our physiological responses continue. Our cortisol levels and other hormonal levels stay elevated. Our body and brains are damaged, And we suffer huge consequences for our physical, emotional, and mental health. So the effects of chronic stress are of huge importance in our modern world. Physical illness is essentially caused by chronic stress. We can predict diabetes, obesity, heart disease, and lifespan based on zip code. With chronic stress, there's a heightened incidence of mental illness and emotional dysfunction, diseases of despair, suicide, homicide, and domestic violence and opiate use, in fact, correlate strongly with political behaviors that are associated with despair and not to many of us rational. And there is what I call the tragic triad of the brain's adaptation to chronic stress. And see if this seems familiar. We have, with chronic stress, high cortisol levels, our frontal lobes, our prefrontal cortex literally deteriorates. We have lessened executive functioning, lessened self-regulation, lessened ability to attend and pay attention to what we want to do, poor impulse control, much greater difficulty with goal-directed decision-making. So we have a loss of this part of our brain, which arguably is what makes us human. Additionally, with high levels of chronic stress, our cognitive function is impaired. So we have decreased memory capabilities and decreased problem solving and cognitive functioning, including a decreased birth of new neurons in the brain. And finally, and sort of the final insult, is that we have lowered threshold to perceive threat. So we begin to experience threat from things that previously we would not have noticed or thought were normal. And we tend to have a heightened response to threat. So chronic stress, it's a major, major problem in our modern world. Brain plasticity means our brains are always changing all the time. And our human brain is shaped not only from birth and early childhood, but throughout our lives. And because of that, it's very important to think about what feeds the good wolf and what feeds the bad wolf, because we're talking about what changes our brains in healthy directions and functional directions, and what changes our brains in directions that are related to self-destructive and societally destructive behavior. So when our physical needs are met, we feel safe, loved, accepted, respected, treated with dignity. It seems that things are fair for us, ourselves and others. We have purpose, often in serving others, and hope about the future. Those things feed the good wolf. Contrarily, our physical needs not being met, chronic toxic stress, unresolved trauma, which we just talked about, fear and uncertainty, deprivation, the lack of nurturing in close relationships, loneliness, feeling a lack of respect, feeling treated unfairly, lack of meaning and lack of hope. And these things literally change our brains in ways that make us not functional and not able to have good lives. Finally, what do we do about all this? And what we suggest is that our future thriving is going to be dependent on what we call the development of sapience, which is the top part of that pyramid we talked about. This, of course, is Einstein's quote. We're capable of self-awareness, self-governance, fairness, love, kindness, and individual and collective moral agency. And so this gets into what we teach about the Good Wolf 3 steps. The first step is that we need to slow down. And slowing down means self-governance and beginning to live our lives based on our values and goals. So we control our impulses, we reflect, self-reflection. Interestingly, self-reflection is being associated with more and more discoveries of physical and mental health. We think about our own thinking. We use our metacognition. We clarify our values and goals. We visualize the pathway. We see that it's possible. We stay with important tasks, think about the long-term consequences, and take responsibility for our behavior. The relevant brain science insights are, we've talked about the neurobiological, the drivers of behavior and our experience, our non-conscious processing, our capability of metacognition and goal-directed behaviors. The second step, we talk about listening and learning. Yes. We talk about listening and learning. So we teach active listening, challenge your assumptions, seek trusted advice, identify gaps in knowledge and skills, and learn and practice and build habits and based on your values and goals. The relevant insights, we've talked about many of these already. And finally, the third step is to feed the good wolf. First in ourselves, by taking care of our physical health, loving and caring and respecting ourselves, choosing our environments carefully, choosing what we expose ourselves to carefully. Relevant insights we've talked about. And the second part of feeding the good wolf is to feed the good wolf in each other. Treat every person with respect. Act based on your values. Invest in friendships. Help others. Build community. Seek friendships with others. And work with like-minded people to serve others. So those are the things that we teach. And we teach use your sapient capabilities and practice the good wolf 3 steps. So we have a couple of reflections and we're almost finished.
My work with good.
And we'll do this sharing thing again, hopefully.
My work with Good Wolf definitely did help me a lot. Hence, I just explained to you that at first I was in trouble with myself, starting to see how things really, and it's just my mind. This is how my mind does to me, and this is, but before that, prior from meeting him, and I just didn't have no idea why certain behavior or why do I think a certain way, why things, you know what I mean? But now it's different, after I said, after we met, I'm like, that's why I say I learned a lot. In a way, it brought a sense of understanding within us as a team as well. You understand? And also, you'll see that the fact that people was willing to listen to, to hear.
John, I lost the video. I don't know if others did as well.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay. So that one is over. And
I think the most important thing about Good Wolf being with lifting up Westchester and going through this, process is really that it opens people's hearts and minds. And again, it gives you an entree to have what can sometimes be challenging conversations. And, resolving conflict can be challenging. But if you can't even initiate that conversation, then you're dead in the water. And so I think the benefit of Good Wolf is that it just opens people up to, feel better and safer and more confident in having those conversations. And that if change needs to be made, that change can be made and change will be made.
So I'm going to go. We had wonderful outcomes, including with the organization, and we were honored for helping them change their culture and improve the care of their organization. And it was really transformative change. I want to stop now, and there are only a few other slides, but why don't we stop, Ron and Liz, and just have a conversation.
That'd be great. I think that was a lot to take in and digest. So I'm sure people have a lot of questions and
Maybe
also a lot of
overwhelming,
thoughts.
Right.
Who would like to get us started? Ricardo, did you want to start us off?
Yes, thank you. That was a great presentation, John. John, you mentioned the word grieving in one of your slides. Can you elaborate on that? What does it mean?
Thank you, Ricardo. It's extraordinarily important to understand that the emotional experience of our brains adapting to major changes is what we describe as grieving. So to some extent, we sort of have this with any major change. If you go back and look at some of the original studies from the 50s on the stress of change, the studies, it was called a series of illness rating scale. And it turns out that good change is associated with as much stress as bad change. And so with change, what happens with major change, what happens in our brain is that we have essentially regression of connections. We temporarily decrease the birthing of new neurons. High levels of cortisol with the stress response that comes from major changes, good or bad, cause a change, they create an increased neuroplasticity in our brain. But the emotional concomitant of that is denial. And why do we deny? Well, when we have a big change in our lives, we're being told we have this big change by the outside sensory input, but our experience in our mind map is that the person's still there, right? And that's what denial is. It's this debate. No, they can't be gone because I'm experiencing them here. They are just as alive as they ever were. How can you tell me they're gone, right? And then it turns out as we have to accept a big change, the emotional as we begin to grapple with it, the emotional concomitant of that is anger. And it's the stages of grieving. It's what Kubler-Ross described. And then we have negotiation, and as we grapple with the brain change, we experience essentially what's a temporary depression, a sadness, a valley of despair. And then as we grapple with it and learn and find new ways to go ahead and have remapped our brains, we climb out of it. And that can be an extraordinarily creative and hopeful time. But change of the brain, change of our brain maps is the grieving process.
We had a couple of questions in the chat. So Miriam, Jessica, and then Liz, me.
Hello, is my video coming through and my voice? Because
Yes.
there's a lag of Wi-Fi.
Now it is. We didn't hear the question.
Okay. Yeah, my question is, when we try to rewire brain with the help of neuroscience and brain plasticity, does the brain actually change for long after experiencing a lot of icebergs or stress trauma or something, because it's in the zone of learning, unlearning, then relearning, and all that. So, does it actually change? Because I think the scars are left somewhere in the brain, and it doesn't always forget, and our bodies have stored the data of memories and stuff. So yeah, that's the question. Thank you.
So it turns out the more emotionally charged any memory is, because we're talking, this is really memory, right? So the more emotionally charged a memory is, the harder, the more solid it is in our memory. And so that if we have particularly traumatic or continuing painful experiences, those things become embedded very, very strongly in our brains. And there's a very, very big literature about this. There's always hope, and it's always possible to remodel that. You never go back to how you were, right? If you've had something in your life which is really important to you, you want to remember it. You just don't want it to be making you dysfunctional. And so what happens with healing from trauma is typically, it requires you're getting into a very, very safe place, both physically and emotionally and socially. And then gradually in a safe and happy place where there is positivity, gradually revisiting that, so that as you remember that, the trauma of it can be associated with good things, even though you can remember the facts. But what we remodel is we remodel its association with the pain. But the more the trauma is, and the harder it's ingrained, the more difficult that is. And that is, that is one of the reasons for the great interest in psychedelics, for instance, in the treatment of trauma. Is it appears that there are a number of drugs that can create enhanced neuroplasticity and enhanced dissociation and allow us to do it more quickly and more effectively. But it's always possible.
Amazing. Miriam, did you want, sorry, Jessica, did you want to ask your question out loud?
Or... sure. It wasn't really a question, but yeah, John, you brought up psychedelics, which is a fascinating area of study. But yeah, I was just mentioning in the chat that there's a lot of interesting research by Aaliyah Crum. I think that's how you say her last name, but at Stanford, about how I think they did a study where like just watching a video showing that stress can be enhancing versus stress is debilitating really had an improved outcome on people's physiological measures and hence like long-term empathy. But I was actually going to ask about psychedelics because this is an area that I'm interested in for personal reasons. I went through a lot of trauma myself, and I've done therapeutic psychedelics with a lot of training, like a lot of preparation, and now I'm training to be an integration coach, like on the side, and a facilitator. And so it's fascinating. They kind of describe it as like if you have these like you've been skiing on a slope for a really long time and you have these grooves in the snow, it's really hard to like not fall into those grooves. But what psychedelics do is, and my experience is psilocybin, but they kind of like shake up the snow globe, or it's kind of like putting fresh powdered snow so that you can take a different route. And another really cool thing is like they've done studies with ducks, and ducks, like they'll imprint on the first like whether it's their mother or if there's a human, they'll imprint on a human. But if you give psychedelics to animals, they actually re-imprint on like whatever's there. So even if they've already imprinted on like a presumed mother, they'll re-imprint. And it's just like, yeah, the research is really fascinating. So I didn't have a specific question except to ask if you had delved into that at all.
Yeah, fascinating. I've done a lot of reading and I talk about this. The important thing is for it to be done in a center where people are credible and experienced. And the other really important thing is that it probably just speeds it up. And it may make it better as well. So, but it's extraordinarily important that the environment be one of safety and happiness and meaning, because that's as you shake anything up, whether it's in various therapeutic approaches or with psychedelic agents, it's extraordinarily important for it to be done in a setting of safety and comfort and happiness.
Yeah, one of the problems we have at least in my state in Pennsylvania is with all the research on ketamine really improving outcomes in depression, a lot of anesthesiologists are popping up with these ketamine clinics, but they don't have any like preparation or therapy that's combined with that. So they're in the literature, they do a lot of therapy before and after. And in practice, it's like, okay, here's these ketamine clinics. And it's like, oh, the research is great. This will cure your depression. But then they're going home and they don't have any follow-up. So they fall back into like old behavior or thought patterns. And so it's not as long lasting as it is in a controlled setting, but it's kind of like, yeah, I wish like, clinical psychology and neuroscience and anesthesiology and all of those, there is like more integration with all those different disciplines.
Right. Yeah. So I have one very quick video I'd like to share. Ron and Liz, I'm willing to stay on and
we do want to be respectful of people's time. So I'm wondering, we only have a minute. Ron, do you want John to show the video, or do you want to? We can stay on a little.
Have
while.
one more question, or you call.
You're on mute, Ron. You're on mute.
There. Sorry about that, folks. Yes, John, do that. And then I need to just take 1 minute for a concluding remark, because as I say, we do know that some of you have commitments to other things this afternoon. And so we promised that when we would conclude, and we will do that. So John, please do share that. Thank you. Go ahead.
I'm really excited about the work that Good Wolf does to be intentional about taking what we know about healthy human development and being really thoughtful about placing it and mobilizing it in the hands of individuals and community members. I think is that what's been missing. We have all seen the impact in people's lives when they understand that what they're feeling isn't because they're bad people or because they're crazy, but that the nervous system actually has expectations. And the greater the experience is from those expectations, right? There's just more vulnerability in the system. And the more of us that have that depth of understanding and the willingness to communicate and partner and collaborate, I think the better shot we all have at giving ourselves and people, those in our community and globally, the best shot at well-being. So the Academy can hold all of this knowledge base, and people can be wondering what's going on. That neuroscientists all over the world, particularly neuroscientists in training, right, see the relevance of the evidence in the way that we live and engage, right? They see the solutions to so many of these social issues in what the Academy knows. Is that Good Wolf has the opportunity and the luxury to be able to think beyond themselves, right? To think about a much broader common good of this type of work. And I think the work of Good Wolf is a perfect opportunity to offer it, right? To say it doesn't have to be hard. Look.
Bravo. What Professor Michael said was much of what I wanted to say. I just want to add that in the history of our little seminar, we have never had such a comprehensive, serviceable, learned in the best sense, and hopeful presentation. And I have actually been focusing on the faces of a number of you in the course of the conversation, and I have actually seen how enlightening how you were enlightened by points that John was making, which was really thrilling. I believe that each of us will be inspired to make some important and life-affirming uses of this extraordinary knowledge and insight. Thank you, John. Bravo.
I'm delighted at the opportunity. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
And please be in touch with me if you're interested in a further conversation.
I will send out a notification enabling you to do that by this afternoon. Thank you. Wonderful.
I'm just saving the chat and all things of that sort.
Thank you, Liz.
Of course.
Hi, Ricardo.
Bye then. Thanks a lot for that. It was very enlightening.
I'm delighted. Thank you. If anybody has any further thoughts or suggestions or things that you say, yeah, you need to do a better job of explaining it, please just let me know, because we're a work in progress. Appreciate all the help we can get.
I'll make one quick comment, John, and that would be, I would love, because it's such an important theme in our society today, also relate some of your information to the issues of dementia.
Yeah,
you know, that's another audience. I know it's a whole different thing, but it's not completely different for sure.
No, it's not completely different, but
right.
what's extremely interesting, Jacqueline, I'm glad you brought it up, is that people's brains continue to be plastic. They continue to grow and develop in the context of a progressive dementia. And
yes, I do know that.
Early in my career, I led the development of one of the early Alzheimer units in Boston that became a national model. And one of the things we observed is that people would come in and they would grow in ways that